My mentor played my private voice note to the entire office like it was a lesson. I sat there silent while he watched to see if I would break. He thought humiliation would rewrite my reputation before promotion week. He didn't realize I was already documenting every file he hid about me. By the time he checked his archive again, it wasn't protecting him anymore. It was preserving the evidence that would end his control. The first thing I heard that morning was my own voice. Soft, shaky, private. And it wasn't coming from my phone. It was drifting across the cubicles, low but clear, from someone's laptop speaker near the analytics pod. My words. My exact tone. The same voice note I recorded at 11:42 p.m. in my apartment, sitting on the edge of my bed in Atlanta, hair still wrapped in a satin scarf. I just feel like I'm working twice as hard and still getting overlooked. My chest tightened, but my face stayed still. I didn't turn my head right away. Slack notifications kept pinging. Keyboards kept tapping. Somebody laughed too softly, then stopped. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Janelle. I'm 27 years old. And this is what really happened. The air conditioning hummed above us like nothing was wrong, but the sound of my own voice kept looping, faint and exposed. I walked past the glass conference room slowly, not rushing, not reacting, just listening. I trusted him because he said he was mentoring me. That line hit differently when it wasn't private anymore. I stopped at my desk and set my tote bag down. Inside it was a Target receipt, my planner, and my work laptop. Normal things, grounded things. My phone buzzed against the laminate surface. 3 unread messages, 2 from my group chat, 1 from an unknown number. I didn't open them yet. Across the aisle, Kayla adjusted her headset and avoided eye contact. Marcus suddenly became very interested in his second monitor. Nobody said my name, but the shift was loud. Corporate offices don't explode with drama. They absorb it. Then they let it spread quietly through posture and silence. Another low replay. I just needed someone to talk to, not judge me. That voice note was never meant for an audience. It was meant for one person. One person. I finally looked up and followed the sound. It was coming from Derek's desk. Derek Whitmore, Senior Strategy Associate, polished, friendly, always smiling in diversity meetings. He had his laptop open, angled slightly away, like he forgot the volume was on. But Derek never forgot details. Never. He noticed me looking, and instead of looking surprised, he smiled. Not wide, not apologetic, just controlled, like he was watching a reaction he had already predicted. I swallowed slowly and logged into my workstation. My fingers moved from muscle memory. Password. 2-factor code. Dashboard open. On the surface, I was working. Inside, something colder was forming. My inbox refreshed automatically. Subject line, Team Culture Reflection Thread. Sent 8:13 a.m. Sender, Derek Whitmore. Recipients, entire operations team. My cursor froze over the email. I clicked, and there it was, an embedded audio file. My audio file. Time-stamped exactly 11:42 p.m. forwarded. Not leaked accidentally. Not missent. Forwarded intentionally with commentary underneath. Sharing this anonymously as an example of how internal frustrations can impact team morale. Thought it might spark a productive conversation. Anonymously. Except it wasn't anonymous at all. My voice is distinct. Soft southern cadence. Clear diction. No background noise except my bedroom fan. People knew. Of course they knew. My skin felt hot under the office lighting, but my posture stayed straight. I clicked the 3 dots beside the email and downloaded a copy. Not dramatic, not rushed, just precise. Documentation before emotion. That's something my mother always taught me. Never react louder than your evidence. I minimized the email and opened the analytics dashboard. Graphs filled the screen, revenue projections, client metrics, forecast models, numbers that didn't gossip, numbers that didn't betray. My phone buzzed again. Kayla, group chat. Girl, are you okay? Bree, group chat. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. I typed nothing. Across the office, Derek stood up and stretched like it was a regular Tuesday. He picked up his Starbucks cup, walked to the break area, and greeted two managers like nothing unusual had happened. Like he hadn't just weaponized my vulnerability before 9 a.m. That voice note wasn't messy. It wasn't scandalous. It was honest. I sent it to him 3 nights ago after a late client call. After he said, "You can vent to me. I'm in your corner." Mentor energy, ally energy, supportive tone. That's how it started. 3 months ago, Derek volunteered to guide me through promotion season. He reviewed my reports, gave feedback on my presentations, and told leadership I had executive potential. I believed him. Because in rooms where I was the youngest Black woman, belief mattered, support mattered, access mattered, and he offered all 3. Or at least, that's what it looked like. The office smelled faintly like printer ink and reheated breakfast sandwiches. Someone microwaved oatmeal. Someone else sprayed perfume near the elevators. Ordinary sensory noise layered over quiet humiliation. I opened the original voice note on my phone and pressed play with the volume low. Same tone, same pauses, same vulnerable sigh at the end. There was no doubt. He didn't edit it. He didn't distort it. He just exposed it, which somehow felt worse, because it meant the betrayal was deliberate, clean, calculated. I stood up to refill my water bottle, not because I was thirsty, because movement helps when dignity feels cornered. As I walked past Derek's desk, he looked up again. "Morning, Janelle," he said lightly, like we weren't standing inside a professional ambush. "Morning," I replied, voice even. His eyes searched my face, scanning for damage, for tears, for anger, for anything loud. I gave him nothing. He leaned back in his chair. "You see the email thread? Good discussion opportunity." Discussion opportunity? My grip tightened slightly on the metal water bottle. "I saw it," I said, and kept walking. The break room lights were brighter than the office floor. Harsh white overhead bulbs, the refrigerator hummed. Ice clinked as I filled my bottle slowly. My reflection in the microwave door looked composed. That part mattered, because in corporate spaces, composure gets misread as weakness or strength, depending on who's watching. I chose strength. I leaned against the counter and finally opened the unknown message. Unknown. "Hey, just a heads up. That audio came from Derek's forwarded folder. He played it in the team sync before you logged on." My jaw tightened. "Played it, not just emailed it. Performed it," I typed back. "Me. Who is this?" Unknown. Someone who doesn't like what he's been doing. The typing bubble disappeared. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Doing, present tense, not did, doing. That word settled differently in my mind. I returned to my desk and opened the company shared drive. Folder after folder, client decks, quarterly reports, compliance archives, everything neatly labeled, everything traceable. Derek loved organization. He bragged about it constantly. "I keep receipts for everything," he once joked during a team lunch. At the time, it sounded professional. Now it sounded like a clue. My cursor hovered over the Team Resources directory, then the Mentorship Materials folder, then a restricted subfolder labeled Internal Reflections. Access, limited. Owner, D. Whitmore. Interesting. Very interesting. I didn't click it yet. Instead, I opened my performance review document. Last quarter's notes, high marks, strong client retention, leadership potential flagged by, of course, Derek. A slow realization settled into my chest. Promotion cycle announcements were next week, and my voice note, a private confession about workplace pressure, suddenly circulating the same week. That timing wasn't random. That was strategy. Kayla rolled her chair slightly toward me, voice low. "Kayla, if you want me to say something in the thread, I will." "Me. Not yet." She studied my face carefully. "You're way calmer than I would be." I gave a small, controlled smile. "Calm doesn't mean unaware," I said. That line stayed with her. It stayed with me, too. Because beneath the calm, something sharper was waking up. Not rage, not panic. Precision. I reopened Derek's email and scrolled slowly. Comments from coworkers trickled in. Polite, neutral, corporate safe language. Important conversation. Thanks for sharing perspective. Team empathy is key. Nobody called it what it was. A violation. A betrayal disguised as leadership. I clicked the audio file properties. Original upload source, external message attachment. Forward chain length 2. Which meant he didn't just receive it. He stored it, then redistributed it. Intentionally. My screen reflected faintly in my glasses as I leaned closer. And that's when I noticed something else. A small linked attachment icon under his email signature. Not visible at first glance, but clickable. Label. Case study. Communication boundaries. My lips pressed together slowly. Case study. He turned my vulnerability into a lesson. Into content. Into professional theater. I clicked the icon. Access denied. Restricted file. Owner D. Whitmore. The same restricted folder. The same pattern. The office buzz continued like a normal workday. Phones ringing, managers scheduling meetings, someone wheeling a chair across the carpet. Life moved forward. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. He thought embarrassment would make me shrink. He thought exposure would make me quiet. He thought professionalism meant silence. He didn't understand one thing about me. I don't break publicly. I document privately. And the moment I saw that restricted file link buried under the email where he exposed my voice to the entire office, a single thought settled into my mind with crystal clarity. If he was comfortable forwarding my private voice note to everyone, then he was comfortable hiding things too. And hidden things always leave trails. The office smelled different after lunch. Not stronger, just heavier. Like reheated pasta, printer heat, and tension. Mixed into the air and settled low around the cubicles. People spoke in softer tones. Laughter stayed short. Slack pings felt sharper than usual. And every time someone's notification sound went off, my shoulders tightened just a little. I kept my eyes on my screen. Spreadsheet open, formula clean, cursor steady, but I could feel the shift in how people moved around me. Not hostile, not loud, just careful. Careful is louder than gossip in corporate spaces. Kayla rolled back to her desk after a meeting and sent me a Slack message instead of speaking out loud. Kayla, the thread is still active. Kayla, he keeps replying to comments. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I opened the email thread again. Derek had replied 3 more times. Important reminder, psychological safety means we should be able to discuss discomfort openly. Another reply. This was shared as a learning moment, not to target anyone. Learning moment. My jaw tightened, but my face stayed neutral. He was framing the narrative before anyone else could. That's how reputation sabotage works in American corporate culture. It's rarely loud. It's language, framing, tone, documentation that looks professional on the surface. Smell of burnt popcorn drifted from the break room. Someone coughed. A chair squeaked across the carpet. Normal sounds. Abnormal situation. My phone buzzed again. Bree? Group chat. Girl, half the team knows it's you. Bree. Not because he said your name, because he didn't have to. I stared at that message longer than I expected. Because she was right. He never mentioned me directly. He didn't need to. My cadence, my phrasing, my voice. People who worked with me daily recognized it instantly. Professional humiliation without direct accusation. Legally safer. Socially damaging. Smart. Very smart. I opened my water bottle and took a slow sip. The metal was still cold against my palm, grounding. Across the aisle, Marcus pretended to focus on his dashboard, but kept glancing in my direction through the reflection of his monitor. Not curiosity, observation. Corporate environments love silent observation. At 1:47 p.m., Derek stood up again and walked toward the collaborative area near the glass wall. He carried his laptop and Starbucks cup like he was heading into a normal team sink. Then he spoke, loud enough for the pod. Hey, quick thought exercise, he said casually, about emotional professionalism in high-pressure roles. My stomach didn't drop. It hardened. 2 associates nodded politely. One manager paused mid-typing. And then, without even looking in my direction, he clicked something on his laptop. And my voice played again. Low volume, but clear enough. I just needed someone to talk to. Kayla's chair stopped moving. Marcus stopped typing. Someone near the window shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't an accident. This was repetition. Repetition creates narrative. Narrative creates perception. And perception decides promotions. I stood up slowly and adjusted my blazer sleeve. No rushing, no visible reaction. Just controlled movement through an open-plan office that suddenly felt 10 degrees warmer. Temperature shifts are strange. Sometimes the AC stays the same, but dignity heats the room. I walked past the collaborative area without stopping. Derek's eyes flicked toward me for half a second. Just half. Like he was checking if the pressure was working. Like he expected a reaction. I gave him none. Instead, I walked straight to the printer station and picked up a random set of documents that weren't even mine. The paper felt dry and slightly warm, the texture grounding in my hands. Touch steadies the mind. Behind me, his voice continued. In leadership pipelines, emotional regulation is key. Leadership pipelines. There it was. Promotion week. He wasn't just embarrassing me. He was disqualifying me, socially, before the official review. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was an internal calendar notification. Promotion review prep, Friday 10 a.m. Organizer, HR operations. I exhaled slowly through my nose. Timing confirmed. I returned to my desk and finally replied in the group chat. Me. I'm okay. Me. Just observing. Bree. Observing what? Me. Patterns. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Kayla. That sounded scary calm. I didn't respond to that, because calm wasn't an act anymore. It was a decision. I clicked into Outlook and opened the email metadata panel. Most employees never use it, but analysts do, and I am very good at patterns, timestamps, and digital trails. Sent time, 8 hours, 13 minutes, and 22 seconds a.m. Attachment upload, 8 hours, 11 minutes, and 5 seconds a.m. Original file name, vn_1142_private.m4a private. He never even renamed the file, which meant one of 2 things: arrogance or confidence that I wouldn't fight back. I leaned back slightly in my chair and let my eyes drift, not to Derek, but to the shared drive icon pinned on my taskbar. Internal reflections, restricted access, owner D. Whitmore. The same folder linked beneath the email. A folder he referenced as a case study source in multiple past meetings. At the time, I assumed it held training materials, best practices, mentorship notes. Now I wasn't so sure. Kayla suddenly wheeled closer, lowering her voice. Kayla. Janelle, did you send that audio to anyone else? Me. No. Kayla blinked slowly. So only one person had it. I met her eyes calmly. Yes. She leaned back in her chair, expression shifting from concern to realization. Oh, that single word carried weight, because now it wasn't speculation. It was a direct breach of trust. Across the office, Derek laughed at something a manager said. Smooth, social, charismatic, the same public persona that made leadership trust him during diversity panels and mentorship sessions. Mask management. He wore it well. I opened our past Slack conversation and scrolled upward. 3 nights ago. 11:38 p.m. Derek. You can vent if you need to. Safe space. Me. Are you sure? Derek. Always. I mentor with discretion. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I tapped the audio file I sent him. Delivered, played, saved, forwarded. A slow breath left my chest. Trust, once documented, becomes evidence. The office lighting shifted slightly as the afternoon sun hit the glass walls. The brightness reflected off monitors and created faint glare patterns across the desks. I adjusted my screen angle, but my focus stayed sharp. At 2:26 p.m., an internal notification popped up. File access request logged, internal reflections, attempted view. My eyes narrowed slightly. Attempted view? I hadn't clicked it yet, which meant the system flagged hover tracking from the embedded email link. Interesting. very interesting. That meant the file was monitored and heavily restricted, which also meant it wasn't just a random folder. It mattered. I minimized the notification and opened the company policy handbook instead. Section Confidential Communications and Workplace Ethics. My fingers scrolled slowly, methodically, like I was reading casually. But I wasn't just reading, I was aligning. Because in U.S. corporate environments, retaliation cases aren't about emotions. They're about documentation, policy violations, and patterns of misconduct. And Derek had just created a documented record, an email, an attachment, a public replay, all traceable, all time-stamped, all institutional. My phone buzzed one more time. Unknown. Check the access logs. Unknown. He keeps a private archive on people. I didn't respond, but something inside me shifted from suspicion to clarity. Private archive. On people. Not projects, not training. People. I slowly opened the shared drive again, this time navigating through a different route. Team audit resources, then submissions, then archived case materials, and there it was again. A shortcut link. Internal reflections, owner access only, but this time a small secondary tag appeared beneath it, linked to mentorship documentation. Mentorship. My stomach didn't twist. It steadied, because now the betrayal had structure. He wasn't just exposing me randomly. He was categorizing me, framing me, archiving me, as a case. As I stared at that folder icon glowing faintly on my screen, Derek's voice drifted across the office again, smooth and composed during a conversation with a senior manager. Emotional intelligence is critical for leadership readiness. Leadership readiness. He said it so confidently, so convincingly, like he wasn't actively undermining the very person he claimed to mentor. I clicked away from the folder without opening it. Not yet. Because rushing would alert the system, and alerting the system would alert him. And if Derek was organized enough to archive private voice notes, then he was organized enough to track access attempts too. I folded my hands on the desk and stared at the dual monitors in front of me, breathing evenly. He thought public embarrassment would make me defensive. Instead, it made me observant. He thought forwarding my private voice note would weaken my professional image before promotion review. Instead, it gave me a time-stamped starting point. And as the faint echo of my own voice played one last time from across the office, still looping from his device like a quiet performance piece, I realized something with absolute certainty. I wasn't the first person in that folder. The light from the glass wall shifted around 3:10 p.m., not softer, sharper. Afternoon sun cut across the office in thin golden lines, reflecting off monitors and turning every surface slightly brighter than usual. It made everything feel more exposed, more visible, like shadows had fewer places to hide, including people. I kept my screen angled just enough to avoid glare, but my attention wasn't on the forecast model anymore. It was on timestamps, patterns, digital footprints, because betrayal in a corporate office rarely leaves fingerprints. It leaves metadata. My mouse hovered over the downloaded audio file sitting quietly in my desktop folder, vn_1142_private.m4a. The original file name still intact, still labeled private, still forwarded anyway. I right-clicked and opened properties. Created 11 hours, 42 minutes, and 18 seconds. PM, modified 8 hours, 10 minutes, and 57 seconds AM. Accessed multiple times between 8:11 a.m. 9:02 a.m. My jaw tightened slightly. Multiple plays. Before the team even logged in. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was rehearsal. Kayla sent another Slack message. Kayla, HR hasn't addressed the thread yet. Kayla, which is weird. I typed back carefully. Me. Not weird, strategic delay. Me. They wait for documentation before intervention. 3 dots appeared immediately. Kayla, you're thinking like a lawyer right now. I didn't respond, because I wasn't thinking like a lawyer. I was thinking like an analyst. And analysts don't chase emotions. They follow trails. The faint click of heels passed behind me. Someone walked toward the elevator. A phone rang near the finance pod. The office smelled faintly like citrus cleaning spray now, probably from facilities doing their afternoon wipe down. Normal maintenance, abnormal tension. I opened Slack again and scrolled back to my conversation with Derek 3 nights ago. The timestamp glowed on the screen like evidence waiting to be acknowledged. Derek, you've been carrying a lot. I can tell. Derek, you can send a voice note if typing feels like too much. I remembered that moment clearly. My apartment, soft lamplight, laptop still open from a late client revision, my bonnet slightly slipping as I sat on my bed, exhausted and emotionally drained after another meeting where my ideas were praised, but credited to someone else. I had hesitated before recording. Then I pressed send, because he said it was safe. Oh, safe is a powerful word in professional spaces, especially for a young Black woman navigating corporate hierarchy. I tapped the voice note in our chat again, played it quietly through my AirPods this time. I just feel like I'm working twice as hard and still having to prove I belong. My own voice sounded smaller than I remembered, more vulnerable, more human. Not unprofessional, just honest. I closed the audio and scrolled further down the chat thread, and that's when I noticed something I had missed before. A small gray system line. File downloaded. Time, 12:03 a.m. My breathing slowed. He didn't just listen to it, he saved it. 16 minutes after I sent it. Then another system line. File accessed, 8:10 a.m. Exactly 3 minutes before the email was sent. Sequence confirmed. Receive, save, archive, forward. Deliberate chain. Across the office, Derek laughed again during a casual conversation with a team lead. His voice carried just enough confidence to sound relaxed, just enough volume to sound presentable. Public charm, private calculation. I minimized Slack and opened the company email archive search. My fingers moved calmly, like I was running a routine data audit. Keyword, reflection. Keyword, communication boundaries. Keyword, mentorship notes. Several internal emails appeared. Most were harmless. Training materials, workshop PDFs, diversity session recaps. Then one subject line stood out. Mentorship reflection log, Q2. Sender, Derek Whitmore. Recipients, self, archived. My eyes narrowed slightly. He emailed logs to himself. That meant one thing. Documentation habit. I clicked the preview pane. Access restricted. Linked folder, internal reflections. Again. Same folder. Same pattern. The light from the window shifted slightly, casting a thin shadow across my keyboard. I flexed my fingers slowly against the keys, grounding myself in the texture of the plastic. Not shaking, not panicking. Processing. My phone buzzed. Bree. Did he apologize privately? Me. No. Bree. That's wild. Yes, it was. Because if this had been accidental, there would have been a message by now. A quick corporate apology, a damage control email, something. Instead, there was silence. Silence is confirmation when accountability is expected. I leaned back slightly in my chair and glanced toward the collaborative area. Derek was presenting something on his screen to a junior associate, posture confident, voice steady. Like the morning never happened. Like my humiliation was just another leadership example in his day. A memory surfaced suddenly. 2 weeks ago, conference room B, after a mentoring session. Derek had said, "You know, Janelle, leadership reviews aren't just about performance. They're about emotional composure under pressure." At the time, it sounded like guidance. Now it sounded like premeditation. I opened the company shared drive again, this time through the compliance portal instead of the email link. Different pathway, different permissions filter, folders loaded slowly. Audit resources, HR templates, ethics training modules, mentorship documentation. There it was, mentorship documentation. Inside it, multiple subfolders labeled by quarter. Q1, Q2, Q3 restricted. Owner D. Whitmore. I didn't click Q3 yet. Instead, I hovered over Q2 and opened the info panel. Linked files 12 accessed by owner only last modified yesterday, which meant he updated logs after receiving my voice note. My pulse stayed steady, but my mind sharpened. He wasn't just reacting to me. He was recording me, categorizing interactions, archiving emotional disclosures, framing them as mentorship reflections. That unknown message replayed in my head. He keeps a private archive on people. Not speculation anymore. Pattern, Kayla suddenly whispered from behind her monitor. Kayla, Janelle, a promotion shortlist draft just got shared with managers. My eyes lifted slightly. Already? I asked quietly. She nodded. Earlier than usual. Of course it was. Because narrative building works best before evaluation meetings. I opened my internal portal and checked the HR timeline. Promotion review. Friday, leadership input deadline, Thursday, 5 p.m. Today was Tuesday, which meant any perception damage now would directly influence Thursday's internal feedback discussions. The timing wasn't just strategic, it was surgical. I folded my hands together and rested them lightly on the desk. A quiet realization settled deeper than anger. He didn't leak my voice note for entertainment. He leaked it for positioning, to frame me as emotionally unstable, overwhelmed, not leadership ready, all while publicly mentoring me. That contradiction was too precise to be accidental. My cursor slowly moved toward the Q3 restricted folder, then stopped, because rushing access could trigger a permission alert. And if Derek received an alert that I was investigating his documentation logs, he would lock everything immediately. Patience was not just emotional discipline now. It was tactical necessity. I leaned forward slightly and opened the IT audit access request form instead. Not submitting, just reading, understanding the process, understanding the trail. Because in U.S. corporate systems, every file tells two stories, its content and its access history. And access history never lies. Behind me, Derek's voice floated across the office again, smooth and composed. "Transparency builds trust," he said to someone casually. I almost smiled, not out of humor, out of clarity, because the man who preached transparency had just built a hidden archive of private conversations labeled as professional reflections and weaponized one of them hours before promotion review season. That wasn't mentorship. That was surveillance disguised as support. I looked back at the restricted Q3 folder icon on my screen. Unopened, locked, quiet, but recently modified. And in that moment, with the late afternoon sunlight stretching across the office floor and my own voice still echoing faintly in memory, a single conclusion became undeniable. The voice note he forwarded wasn't just saved, it was filed. The touch of my keyboard felt different by late afternoon. Not rough, just more deliberate. Every keystroke was slower, measured, intentional. Like my hands understood before my mind fully said it out loud. This wasn't just office drama anymore. This was documentation warfare. The office lighting softened as the sun dipped lower behind the Atlanta skyline. The glass walls reflected warm gold onto desks, monitors, and polished floors, making everything look calmer than it actually was. Calm visuals, strategic tension. Derek stood near the collaboration board, explaining something to two senior associates. His posture was relaxed, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing confidently like he was leading a workshop instead of quietly dismantling someone's reputation. "Emotional regulation is a core leadership trait," he said smoothly. I didn't look up immediately, but I heard every word. Because when someone tries to define your narrative publicly, they always rehearse the language first. Kayla sent another Slack message. "Kayla, he just mentioned professional composure, again in that mini huddle." "Kayla, this is not random." "Me, no, it isn't." Short, controlled, accurate. Across the office, someone dragged a chair slightly, the soft scrape blending into the hum of printers and distant phone calls. The environment stayed corporate normal, but socially altered. People weren't avoiding me anymore. They were observing me. And observation is currency in U.S. office culture. I opened my performance dashboard again, but instead of metrics, I clicked the internal org chart. Derek's profile appeared instantly. Title, Senior Strategy Associate. Mentorship role, voluntary, internal leadership pipeline. Review contributor. Yes. My eyes paused on that last line. Review contributor. which meant he had influence over promotion feedback. Not final authority, but narrative influence. Enough to shape perception before formal review meetings. A memory surfaced from last month's diversity roundtable. Derek had spoken confidently in front of leadership. "We have to protect psychological safety for emerging talent." People nodded, leadership smiled, HR took notes. He knew exactly which phrases earned institutional trust, and now he was using those same phrases as cover. I scrolled further down his internal profile and noticed something subtle. A linked resource tab labeled Mentorship Case Archives. Archives, plural. My fingers rested lightly on the trackpad. The surface felt cool, smooth, grounding. Physical texture helping emotional control. I didn't click yet. Instead, I opened the shared project folder we co-managed. The one he always guarded closely during team syncs. The one he never let juniors reorganize. Project Atlas, Strategic Review. Inside, clean subfolders, client decks, financial models, quarterly summaries. Everything looked perfectly professional. Too perfect. Highly curated folders in corporate environments usually mean one thing: selective transparency. My phone vibrated quietly against the desk. Unknown. Check file naming patterns. Unknown. He labels people as reflections. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second. Then I locked my phone. Because whoever that was, they knew too much, and they weren't guessing. I returned to the shared drive and changed the folder view from grid to detailed list. File names expanded instantly. Reflection_log_Q. 1 reflection_log_Q2. Mentorship_notes_internal case ref_communication_emotional. My breathing stayed steady. Case ref. Case reference. Not mentorship notes. Case references. The language shift mattered. Language reveals intent. Behind me, Derek walked back to his desk and sat down, typing quickly. His expression stayed calm, composed, almost bored, the exact demeanor of someone who believed they were still in control of the narrative. He didn't glance at me this time, which told me something even louder. He thought the damage was already done. Kayla suddenly whispered from the side of her monitor. "Kayla, HR manager just walked past his desk twice." I nodded slightly without turning. "Noted," I said softly. She hesitated. "Are you going to report this?" I paused for half a second, then answered carefully, "Not until I understand the full pattern. Because partial truth gets dismissed. Complete documentation gets escalated." The office temperature dropped slightly as the AC cycled again. A faint chill brushed against my arms, but my posture remained upright, composed, controlled. I clicked into the file history panel of Project Atlas. Recent activity: D. Whitmore. Modified, yesterday, D. Whitmore. Uploaded file, private, file location, restricted subdirectory. Private upload, yesterday, the same day he archived my voice note. Coincidence was no longer a logical explanation. I leaned back slowly and folded my hands together on the desk. 2 days ago, Derek had scheduled a one-on-one check-in with me. I remembered the exact conversation. Conference room C, glass walls, neutral lighting. "Derek, you're talented, Janelle, but leadership watches emotional resilience closely." Me: "I handle pressure well." Derek: "Yes, but perception matters more than reality sometimes." At the time, it sounded like advice. Now it sounded like groundwork. Groundwork for a narrative he intended to reinforce later. My screen reflected faintly in my glasses as I opened the restricted directory tree again through the compliance pathway. Different entry, different visibility filter. And this time, something new appeared beneath the Q3 restricted archive. Linked source files, audio attachments, internal observations, behavioral notes. Behavioral notes. My fingers stopped moving. He wasn't just saving conversations. He was profiling responses, profiling emotional reactions, labeling them, archiving them, like case studies. The realization didn't make my chest tighten. It made my mind sharpen. Because this was no longer just betrayal. This was pattern documentation without consent. Across the office, a soft laugh broke out near the marketing pod. Someone mentioned happy hour plans. Someone else talked about ride shares and traffic on Peachtree Street. Normal life continued in the background. But inside my awareness, the environment had shifted permanently. This wasn't about embarrassment anymore. It was about control. Control of narrative, control of perception, control of professional trajectory. Kayla sent another message. Kayla, he just submitted feedback on the leadership form. Kayla, I saw the system notification. My eyes narrowed slightly. Submission deadline was Thursday, and he already submitted input, which meant the voice note wasn't just shared randomly this morning. It was shared before submitting his evaluation. That sequence changed everything. Receive vulnerability, public exposure, submit leadership feedback, strategic order, not emotional impulse. I slowly opened the internal ethics handbook again, scrolling directly to the mentorship policy section. Mentors must not store, distribute, or repurpose private communications shared in confidence without explicit written consent. My gaze stayed locked on that line. Explicit written consent. He had none. Not a message, not a clause, not a disclaimer, just a promise of discretion in Slack, and a forwarded audio file to the entire operations team. My phone buzzed once more. Unknown. You're not the only one in that archive. Unknown. He did it last year, too. My thumb tightened slightly around the phone. Last year. Archive. Pattern confirmed. I looked across the office again. Derek sat upright, reviewing documents like a model employee. Calm posture, professional focus. The same public mask that made leadership trust him during mentorship reviews and diversity panels. The same mask that made his actions harder to question. Because polished people get the benefit of doubt in corporate America, especially when their harm looks professional. I returned my focus to the restricted directory and hovered over one specific subfolder that hadn't been visible earlier. caseref_Q3_internal. Locked, recently modified. Owner, D. Whitmore. The trackpad felt colder under my fingertips as I hovered there. Not clicking, not rushing, just observing. Because access timing mattered. Audit logs mattered. And if he was meticulous enough to archive private voice notes under case references, then he was meticulous enough to monitor who accessed those files, which meant one wrong click could alert him instantly. I exhaled slowly and minimized the window. Patience over impulse. Documentation over reaction. Across the office, Derek finally looked in my direction again. Not long, not obvious. Just a quick glance. Like he was checking whether the pressure had changed my behavior. It hadn't. I was still working, still composed, still silent. But internally, the narrative had shifted completely. He thought he was mentoring me, then exposing me, then professionally disqualifying me. What he didn't realize was this. The moment he archived my private voice note inside a restricted case reference folder, he stopped being a mentor and started becoming evidence. The space around my desk felt tighter the next morning. Not physically smaller, just socially compressed. Chairs still rolled, keyboards still clicked. But the invisible distance between people and me had shifted overnight. The office smelled like fresh carpet cleaner and roasted coffee beans from the lobby cafe downstairs. Early morning light filtered through the glass panels, pale and cool, spreading across the floor in long rectangular shapes. I arrived at 8:02 a.m., earlier than usual, not because I was anxious, because I needed uninterrupted access to systems before the office fully populated with movement and noise. My badge tapped against the security scanner. Beep, green light, entry logged. Every entry in this building left a record. Every login left a trail. Every file access left a timestamp. And today, timestamps mattered more than emotions. I placed my laptop on the desk and powered it on. The startup hum was low and steady, grounding. My reflection flickered briefly across the dark screen before the login page appeared. Composed face, steady eyes. No visible collapse, because quiet humiliation either breaks you publicly or sharpens you privately. I chose the second. Before opening anything work-related, I pulled up the internal audit portal. Most employees never touched it. Too technical, too procedural, too intimidating. But analysts lived in systems, and systems never lied. Login confirmed. 8 hours, 5 minutes, and 14 seconds AM, user access level, standard analyst, audit view, limited. I navigated to the file pathway again. Compliance, mentorship documentation, restricted archives. The folder structure loaded slowly, like it was verifying credentials with every layer. Q1, Q2, Q3 restricted. caseref_Q3_internal. Still there, still recently modified. Still owned solely by Derek Whitmore. The texture of the trackpad felt smooth under my fingertips as I hovered over the folder info panel instead of clicking. Hovering didn't trigger full access alerts. Opening did. Info panel. Last modified. Yesterday, 7:48 p.m. linked source files, 7 attachment types, audio, text logs, internal notes. 7. My voice note was one of 7. A quiet chill moved through my arms, but my breathing stayed even. Not the first. Not the only. A pattern archive. Kayla's chair rolled in at 8:17 a.m., wheels softly pressing into the carpet. She set down her iced coffee and glanced at me carefully before even logging in. Kayla, you got here early. Me. Needed system clarity. She blinked slowly. That sounds serious. I kept my eyes on the screen. It is. She lowered her voice instinctively. Kayla, he hasn't come in yet. That detail mattered because Derek usually arrived at 8:30 sharp. Predictable schedule, predictable behavior, predictable system usage windows. I opened the Audit Logs tab and filtered by folder activity. caseref_Q3_internal, access history, owner access, 7:48 p.m. yesterday, owner access, 12:06 a.m., no external access recorded. Midnight access. That aligned exactly with the timestamp when he downloaded my voice note. Sequence tightening. My phone vibrated softly against the desk. Unknown. Audit logs confirm it? Unknown. He updates those files after mentorship talks. My thumb hovered. Then I replied for the first time. Me. Who are you? 3 dots appeared instantly, then paused, then disappeared. No answer. Interesting. Across the office, the lights brightened automatically as motion sensors detected more arrivals. Soft footsteps, muted greetings, elevator chimes in the distance. The workday was officially beginning, which meant my window for silent investigation was closing. I clicked into the ethics compliance request section. Form title, internal documentation review. Mentorship oversight. My pulse remained steady as I read the guidelines. Employees assigned to mentorship programs may request documentation transparency if personal communications were recorded, archived, or distributed without written consent. There it was. Policy alignment, not emotional retaliation, institutional procedure. I didn't submit the form yet. Submitting too early would alert Derek immediately through system notification flags tied to his archive ownership, and I wasn't ready for him to start deleting anything. Preservation before confrontation. Kayla leaned closer again, whispering, Kayla, he just walked in. I didn't turn. Instead, I watched the access log panel, 8 hours, 31 minutes, and 9 seconds AM. Owner Logan detected, system-wide. Right on schedule. Footsteps approached across the carpet, measured, confident, familiar. Derek. He set his laptop down at his desk and greeted the team casually. Morning, everyone. Normal tone, polished voice, same public composure. Like yesterday's exposure never happened, like my private voice note wasn't still circulating in an email thread archived under team culture. I opened my email quietly. New message. From Derek Whitmore. Subject, quick check-in later. My jaw tightened slightly. Timing, calculated as always. Message preview. Would love to debrief on how you're feeling after yesterday's discussion. Discussion. Not exposure. Not violation. Discussion. Language control again. I didn't reply. Instead, I clicked the Audit Trail Export option and saved a timestamp report to my secured desktop folder. File name, audit_log_restricted archive_0215.pdf, documentation step 1. Across the aisle, Derek laughed softly at something on his screen. Then, casually, he opened his shared drive. I watched the activity panel. 8 hours, 34 minutes, and 22 seconds a.m. Owner access, caseref_Q3_internal. He was checking the archive, right now, which meant one thing. He was monitoring usage, making sure nothing had been accessed overnight. My fingers stayed still on the keyboard. If I opened the folder now, the system would log simultaneous access, and he would know instantly. Not suspicion, confirmation. So I did the opposite. I opened Project Atlas instead. Visible work, normal activity, zero suspicion. Because the strongest strategic move in corporate environments is controlled normalcy. Kayla sent another Slack message. Kayla, he keeps glancing at your desk. Kayla, like he's waiting for something. Me, he's waiting for a reaction. Kayla, and he's not getting one. Me, exactly. Across the office, Derek stood and walked toward the printer. As he passed my desk, he paused just slightly, not enough to seem intentional, just enough to speak quietly. Derek, hope you're doing okay after yesterday. His tone was gentle, professional, almost concerned. A perfect performance. I looked up calmly. I'm focused on work, I replied. He gave a small nod, measured smile. That's good. Leadership appreciates composure. Leadership, always circling back to that word. He walked away before I responded. But the moment he turned his back, my screen refreshed automatically. A new system tag appeared beneath the restricted archive folder. Linked mentorship session, pending entry. Pending entry. My breath slowed, which meant he was planning to log a new reflection about yesterday, about my reaction, or lack of reaction. He wasn't just archiving past conversations. He was actively documenting my behavioral response to public humiliation. That crossed from unethical into procedural misconduct territory. My cursor moved slowly toward the compliance handbook again. Section 8.4, unauthorized documentation of personal disclosures. I read the line twice. Archiving private employee disclosures without consent for evaluative or reputational framing constitutes a violation of internal mentorship ethics policy. Violation. Not gray area, not interpretation. Policy violation. The office filled with more people now. Conversations layered, chairs rolled. A faint ringtone played somewhere near the finance pod. The normal rhythm of corporate life resumed fully. But inside the system panel on my screen, the truth sat quietly in black and white. 7 archived files, midnight updates, behavioral logs, mentorship labeling, and one of those files was my private voice note he forwarded to the entire office before submitting promotion feedback. I closed the handbook slowly and rested my hands on the desk. Not shaking, not emotional, strategic. Because at this point, revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It was about exposure through documented truth. And as I stared at the restricted caseref_Q3_internal folder, still unopened, still monitored, still quietly holding 7 archived reflections, one realization settled into my mind with absolute precision. If he was preparing a new entry about me this morning, then my voice note wasn't just archived as evidence. It was being used as a case file. The temperature in the office felt colder that afternoon. Not freezing, just controlled. Like the AC had been calibrated for focus, not comfort. A quiet chill settled across my forearms as I typed, steady and precise, while the low hum of ventilation blended with keyboard clicks and distant phone calls. Everything sounded normal, which made the abnormal behavior easier to hide. I opened the audit log file I saved earlier and reviewed it line by line. Each timestamp sat cleanly in a neat column, unemotional and factual. Systems don't dramatize, they document. Owner access, 12:06 a.m. owner access, 7:48 p.m. owner access, 8:34 a.m., 3 deliberate check-ins to the same restricted archive. Not random curiosity. Maintenance. Maintenance of a narrative vault. My mouse moved slowly to the Export Verification tab. A small note appeared beneath the log. System traceable, retention compliant, suitable for internal review. That line mattered more than anything Derek had said all week, because in U.S. corporate environments, opinions can be dismissed. System logs cannot. Kayla leaned slightly over her divider, voice barely above a whisper. Kayla, he just scheduled a mentorship recap meeting with you. My eyes stayed on the screen. When? I asked quietly. Kayla checked her monitor. Today, 4:30 p.m. conference room B. Of course, glass walls, controlled environment, recorded conversation potential. I inhaled slowly and opened my calendar. The invite was already there. Subject, mentorship reflection and emotional check-in. Organizer, Derek Whitmore. Reflection, the same word attached to his archive folders. That wasn't coincidence anymore. That was a documentation system. I clicked accept without hesitation, not because I trusted him, because meetings create records. And records create protection. My phone buzzed against the desk. Unknown. He logs reactions after private meetings. Unknown. Stay calm in the room. I stared at the message for a long second, then locked my phone, because whoever this person was, they understood his pattern almost as well as I was beginning to. Across the office, Derek stood near the coffee station, speaking casually with a senior manager. His posture was relaxed, voice smooth, facial expression composed. A perfect professional image. No tension, no visible guilt, no urgency. People like him didn't panic. They curated. I opened the compliance portal again and navigated to documentation preservation. My fingers moved carefully, selecting options that did not trigger immediate alerts. Archive monitoring flag, passive. Audit snapshot, saved locally. Access trail, secured copy created. Every step was legal. Every step was procedural. Every step was quiet. The texture of my desk felt slightly rough under my fingertips as I rested my hands flat, grounding myself before the next move, because this wasn't about catching him emotionally. This was about catching him structurally. At 2:12 p.m., the internal system refreshed again. New entry logged, mentorship documentation, draft mode, owner D. Whitmore, draft mode, which meant he had started writing about me already. Before even speaking to me in the scheduled meeting, my jaw tightened subtly. Pre-written narrative, that confirmed it. He wasn't documenting mentorship. He was scripting perception. Kayla sent another message. Kayla, promotion committee prep notes are being finalized today. Kayla, his input carries weight. Me, noted. Short answers preserved emotional neutrality. Neutrality preserved professional optics. Across the aisle, Marcus finally spoke for the first time since yesterday. Marcus, hey Janelle, you good? His tone wasn't intrusive, just cautious. I looked up briefly. I'm focused, I replied. He nodded once and returned to his screen. That interaction told me something important. The office wasn't against me. They were waiting to see if I would react emotionally or strategically. At 3:05 p.m., I opened the ethics handbook again and navigated directly to mentorship policy cross-references. A specific clause caught my attention. Mentors must not use confidential disclosures as evaluative material in performance or leadership documentation without explicit consent. Evaluative material. My voice note had been forwarded the same morning he submitted leadership feedback. That sequence alone was a red flag. I highlighted the clause and saved a PDF copy to my secured folder. File name, policy_clause_8.4_mentorship_ethics.pdf, documentation stack growing. Outside the window, late afternoon clouds rolled slowly across the Atlanta skyline. The lighting dimmed slightly, casting longer shadows across the office floor. The environment felt heavier, quieter, more observant. At 3:47 p.m., Derek walked past my desk again. He stopped. Not abruptly, just deliberately. Derek, looking forward to our conversation later. I want to support your growth. Support. Such a carefully chosen word. I met his gaze calmly. I value documentation and clarity, I said evenly. His smile paused for half a second. Just half. Then it returned. Of course, he replied smoothly. Transparency is important. Transparency. From the man maintaining a restricted archive of private disclosures, he walked away, but that half-second pause told me everything. He was confident, but not fully comfortable. I opened the audit panel again and checked one more detail. File integrity status. All 7 archived files remained intact. No deletions, no modifications since morning, which meant he hadn't realized yet that his system trail was now preserved outside his control. My phone vibrated again. Unknown. If he logs a reflection after your meeting, that becomes official mentorship record. Official record. That phrase echoed quietly in my mind. Because official records influence promotion discussions, performance narratives, leadership readiness labels, and he was building one about me in real time. I closed my laptop halfway and rested my palms against the edge of the desk. The surface felt cool, steady, grounding. My breathing remained slow, controlled, deliberate. Humiliation had already happened. Public exposure had already occurred. Narrative framing had already begun. Now the phase was documentation chess. At 4:28 p.m., my calendar notification appeared. Meeting in 2 minutes, conference room B. Glass walls, neutral chairs, internal recording possibility through meeting notes. I stood up, adjusted my blazer sleeve, and picked up my notebook. Not for appearances, but for time-stamped written records. Every professional meeting note can become evidence, especially when misconduct hides behind mentorship language. As I walked toward conference room B, the carpet softened my footsteps while the faint hum of the office faded behind me. Derek was already inside, laptop open, posture relaxed, as if he had been waiting. Prepared, curated, document ready. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Have a seat, Janelle. This is just a reflective conversation." Reflective. The same word attached to his archive files, his logs, his hidden documentation system. I sat down calmly, placed my notebook on the table, and glanced briefly at the glass walls surrounding us. Semi-transparent, visible enough for optics. Private enough for controlled dialogue. A perfect setting for narrative manipulation. Derek folded his hands and spoke gently. "I wanted to discuss how you processed yesterday's situation emotionally. Not ethically, not professionally, emotionally." Framing again. I met his eyes steadily. "I'm more interested in how my private voice note became public," I replied. For the first time, his smile didn't return immediately. And in that brief silence, with the AC humming softly above us and his laptop screen still open, likely ready for another reflection entry, one realization settled deeper than anything else. This meeting wasn't about support. It was about documentation. The texture of the conference table felt smooth and cool under my fingertips. Polished wood, corporate neutral. Conference room B always smelled faintly like dry erase markers and recycled air. The glass walls let in filtered light from the office floor, blurring silhouettes of coworkers walking past, unaware that a reputational narrative was being quietly negotiated inside. Derek sat across from me with his laptop already open, screen angled slightly away, notebook beside it, pen aligned parallel to the keyboard. Prepared posture, documentation posture. "I want this to be a safe conversation," he said calmly. The word safe landed differently now. 3 nights ago, he used that same tone when he asked me to vent. Yesterday, he forwarded my private voice note to the entire office. Today, he wanted a reflective check-in. Patterns reveal intent more than words. I opened my notebook slowly and wrote the time in the top corner. 4:31 p.m., mentorship meeting, initiated by Derek Whitmore. Not dramatic, just factual. He noticed the note-taking immediately. "That's good," he said with a small nod. "Documenting your emotional processing is healthy." Emotional processing. Again, he was steering the language away from ethics and toward psychology. I looked up at him, calm and steady. "I prefer documenting events," I replied. A brief pause, subtle, Measured, not accidental. Outside the glass wall, someone walked past holding a laptop charger. Another person laughed softly near the hallway. Life continued normally, which made the quiet tension inside the room feel sharper by contrast. Derek leaned back slightly in his chair. Yesterday's email was meant as a professional reflection exercise, he said, not a personal exposure. My pen moved across the page. Statement logged. Email described as professional reflection exercise. I didn't interrupt him. Silence makes people expand their own explanations. He continued. In leadership environments, emotional transparency can be reframed into growth narratives. Growth narratives, carefully crafted language, corporate safe phrasing, institutional camouflage. I lifted my eyes. My private voice note was sent to you in confidence, I said evenly. He folded his hands. Yes, and I anonymized it. That word almost made me pause. Anonymized. I wrote it down. Claim audio was anonymized. Then I looked directly at him. My voice is identifiable, I said. And the file name still included the word private. His jaw tightened slightly. Not visibly to most people, but noticeable if you were watching closely. He shifted his posture, tapping lightly on his laptop keyboard. A soft click echoed in the quiet room. I understand how it may have felt uncomfortable, he replied. May have felt. Not was inappropriate. Not was a mistake. Just reframed discomfort. That confirmed something critical. He was protecting the documentation narrative. I rested my pen gently on the notebook. Did you archive my voice note? I asked. A pause. Short, controlled, carefully calculated. I maintain mentorship reflections for professional development purposes, he said. Reflections, plural. Archive confirmed without direct admission. I wrote another line. Owner statement. Maintains mentorship reflections. Plural documentation. The AC vent above us hummed softly, circulating cool air across the room. My hand stayed steady against the table. My breathing remained slow and controlled. He watched me write, carefully, analytically, like he was realizing this conversation wasn't going the direction he expected. Most people cry in rooms like this, or get defensive, or apologize for being hurt. I was documenting. And that changed the power dynamic instantly. Derek leaned forward slightly. I want to help position you positively for promotion discussions, he said, but leadership evaluates composure under pressure. There it was again. Promotion, framing, evaluation. I met his gaze without raising my voice. Was my private disclosure used in any leadership feedback submission? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then slowly pulled back. I provide holistic mentorship insights, he answered. Holistic insights. Not a denial. Not a yes. A corporate evasion. I wrote, no direct denial regarding evaluative usage. Outside, the faint sound of a printer activating filled the silence between us. A chair rolled somewhere across the office floor. The normal sounds made the tension inside the room feel even more precise. He cleared his throat slightly. You're handling this situation with notable restraint, he said. That will reflect well. Reflect well. Documentation language again. He wasn't just talking to me. He was mentally logging me, observing behavior, categorizing reactions. Preparing another entry. I glanced briefly at his laptop screen reflection in the glass wall. A document was open. Cursor blinking. Text already typed. Pre-written draft. My pulse stayed steady. You began a reflection draft before this meeting, I said calmly. For the first time, he froze. Not dramatically, just a stillness in his shoulders. I prepare structured notes for all mentorship sessions, he replied. Another indirect confirmation, structured notes, reflections, archives, 7 files already existed. Mine was simply the newest addition. I leaned back slightly in my chair, maintaining eye contact. Were previous mentees' private disclosures also archived in this system? I asked. That question landed heavier than the others, because it expanded the scope, from personal incident to pattern behavior. His smile returned, but slower this time. All mentorship documentation is confidential and professionally maintained, he said. Confidential, the same system that forwarded my private audio to the entire office. The contradiction was now documented verbally. I wrote one final line on the page. Verbal position, confidential documentation system acknowledged. The room felt colder, not physically, strategically, because he was now aware that every word he spoke was being recorded in written form. He closed his laptop halfway. "I sense you're approaching this from a procedural perspective," he said. "I am," I replied. Short, direct, unemotional. His eyes studied my face carefully, searching for frustration, hurt, or instability. He found none. Only composure. Only documentation. Only control. That realization unsettled him more than any accusation could have. He adjusted his tie slightly and changed tone. "My intention has always been to support your professional growth." Support. A word now hollow in context. I closed my notebook slowly. "My intention," I said calmly, "is clarity and documentation regarding how my confidential communication was stored, reframed, and distributed." Silence followed. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy with implication, because the language had shifted fully from emotion to procedure. And procedure is where corporate accountability lives. Outside the glass wall, two managers walked past mid-conversation, completely unaware that inside this room, a mentorship narrative was quietly unraveling under documented scrutiny. Derek exhaled slowly and gave a small, measured nod. "I'll ensure future communications are handled with greater discretion," he said. Future, not past, not accountability, just forward-facing damage control. But that sentence alone was significant, because it implied acknowledgement, and acknowledgement, once documented, becomes leverage. I stood up calmly, notebook in hand. "Thank you for the meeting," I said. Professional, controlled, final. As I walked toward the door, I glanced once more at his laptop screen. The draft document title was visible for half a second. Reflection entry, Janelle, emotional resilience observation, not mentorship, not support, observation. And in that precise moment, as my hand touched the cool metal door handle and the quiet hum of the office returned outside the glass walls, a single realization locked into place with absolute clarity. He wasn't just documenting conversations. He was building behavioral profiles. The music in the office shifted near 9:15 a.m. the next day. Not loud, just faint. Someone in marketing always played low lo-fi instrumentals through a desk speaker every morning. Soft beats, no lyrics, background rhythm meant to keep productivity flowing without distraction. Today, the music felt sharper, like every beat landed between decisions. I logged in at 8:58 a.m., earlier than most of the team again. The office lights were still in partial mode, only the rows near the windows fully illuminated. My desk lamp cast a focused circle of light across my keyboard, isolating my workspace from the rest of the dim floor. Controlled space, controlled focus. My system notifications loaded one by one. Calendar reminders, client emails, internal alerts. Then one new entry appeared in the audit feed. Mentorship documentation updated, 6:12 a.m. owner, D. Whitmore file, modified, reflection entry, Janelle, emotional resilience observation. My fingers stilled over the trackpad. 6:12 a.m. He woke up early to log me. Not the incident, not the ethics concern, my composure. I opened my secured folder and compared yesterday's audit snapshot with the new log. The timestamps aligned exactly with the draft I glimpsed on his screen in Conference Room B draft, finalized entry, which meant he documented our private meeting as an official mentorship reflection, without my consent, without transparency, after publicly distributing my confidential voice note. That sequence crossed from unethical behavior into institutional liability territory. The faint lo-fi beat continued in the background, steady and repetitive, just like a metronome measuring how long narratives take to solidify inside corporate systems. Kayla arrived at 9:07 a.m., placing her bag down quietly before leaning toward me. "Kayla, he sent another internal note this morning." My eyes lifted slightly. "To who?" I asked softly. "Leadership prep thread," she whispered. of course. Documentation layered into influence channels. I opened the leadership prep workspace and filtered recent contributions. Derek's name appeared twice. Entry summary. Demonstrates composure, but exhibits signs of emotional internalization under pressure scenarios. My jaw tightened subtly. Emotional internalization, a clinical label, professional sounding, reputation shaping, not based on performance metrics, based on a private disclosure he archived and reframed. The lo-fi track shifted to a slower rhythm, bass slightly deeper now. The sound blended with keyboard tapping across the office as more employees logged in. Normal morning sounds. Abnormal professional framing. My phone buzzed quietly. Unknown. He finalized your profile entry, didn't he? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened the compliance portal again and navigated to documentation transparency requests. My cursor hovered over the submission form. Request type, mentorship record review, policy reference, clause 8.4, confidential disclosure handling. Everything aligned, everything documented, everything traceable. Across the office, Derek walked in at 9:22 a.m., exactly on schedule, carrying a fresh Starbucks cup and greeting coworkers with his usual composed smile. Morning, team. Polished, measured, unbothered. He sat down, opened his laptop, and within seconds, the activity panel refreshed. Owner access, caseref_Q3_internal, 9:24 a.m. Routine check, archive maintenance. He was protecting the narrative he built. I clicked Save Draft on the compliance request instead of submitting. Not yet. Timing still mattered. Once submitted, the system would lock preservation logs automatically, preventing silent deletion, but I needed one more confirmation, one final structural link between my voice note and his archive system. I opened the internal email properties panel again and re-examined the forwarded audio file. This time, I expanded the hidden metadata section, linked source path, user archive, mentorship reflections, caseref_Q3_internal, audio attachments. There it was. Direct linkage, not speculation, not assumption. System confirmed origin. My private voice note had been pulled directly from his restricted mentorship archive before being forwarded to the entire office, which meant one critical fact. He archived it first, then weaponized it second. The lo-fi music continued looping quietly, almost eerily steady, as if the office environment itself refused to acknowledge the structural breach sitting inside its own digital systems. Kayla sent a Slack message. Kayla, promotion committee meeting moved up to tomorrow. Kayla, that's unusual. Yes, it was. Because expedited meetings usually followed newly submitted leadership input. Input that now included a behavioral reflection entry about my emotional internalization. I opened my secured evidence folder and reviewed everything in order. Original voice note timestamp, email forwarding metadata, archive linkage path, audit logs, midnight access, reflection entry update, 6:12 a.m., leadership prep phrasing influenced by mentorship notes. Pattern complete, not emotionally, systemically. Across the aisle, Derek laughed lightly at something on a colleague's screen. His posture relaxed, confidence intact, unaware that the system trail connecting his archive to the public email was now fully preserved in my documentation stack. The music shifted again. Same beat, slightly higher pitch, blending with the low hum of air conditioning. I finally opened the compliance submission form fully. As a section. Description of concern. My fingers hovered for a moment before typing calmly, private voice communication sent in confidence to assigned mentor was archived under restricted mentorship documentation and subsequently distributed internally as a professional reflection example without written consent. Clear, factual, legally neutral. No emotional language, no accusations, only traceable events. I attached the audit snapshot file, then the metadata export, then the policy clause PDF, supporting documentation uploaded. 3 files, system response, documentation preservation protocol will activate upon submission. Preservation protocol, which meant archive access would be logged permanently. File deletion attempts would be flagged. Ownership review would be triggered automatically. My breathing stayed slow and steady as I reread the report one final time. Across the office, Derek's activity panel refreshed again. Owner editing, reflection logs, 9:41 a.m. He was still updating narratives in real time, still refining the professional image he constructed, still unaware that the same system he used to archive private disclosures was now about to preserve every trace of his actions permanently. I moved the cursor to the submit button, paused, then clicked. Submission sent. 9 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds AM Department, Ethics and Compliance Review Registry. Logged, internal case file generated. A new line appeared at the bottom of the confirmation window. Compliance case registered. County corporate record hash 2026 EC 48217. Digitally notarized by internal notary public. That line mattered more than any confrontation ever could, because the moment a compliance registry number exists, the narrative leaves personal control and enters institutional review. My phone buzzed immediately. Unknown. You filed it. Not a question, a statement. I locked the phone without replying. Across the office, nothing visibly changed. People still worked. Music still played. Conversations still flowed. But inside the system, a structural shift had just occurred. I watched the audit panel one more time. 9:45 a.m. Archive status, preservation lock enabled, compliance triggered. Which meant Derek could no longer quietly edit, delete, or reframe the archive without leaving a permanent trail. And for the first time since he forwarded my private voice note to the entire office, the balance of control moved. Silently, professionally, and irreversibly out of his hands. The shadows in the office looked longer the next morning. Not darker, just more defined. Sunlight stretched through the glass walls at sharp angles, casting thin lines across desks, keyboards, and the polished floor. It made every movement more visible, every posture more noticeable. And visibility changes behavior. I arrived at 8:21 a.m. and noticed the first difference immediately. Derek was already there, earlier than usual. His laptop was open, his posture slightly rigid, his usual relaxed smile absent. Preservation lock had activated yesterday at 9:45 a.m., which meant every archive interaction since then was permanently traceable. And he knew it. I logged into my system quietly and opened the audit feed without opening any other applications. New entry, owner access attempt, caseref_Q3_internal, 7:12 a.m. system notice, preservation lock active, edits logged. My fingers rested calmly on the desk. He tried to access the archive early, likely to review, possibly to adjust. But now every action was recorded. Across the office, the usual morning chatter felt lower than normal. Conversations happened in quieter tones, chairs rolled more softly, even the lo-fi music from marketing played at a slightly lower volume today. Atmosphere shift, not loud, not dramatic, institutional. Kayla slid into her seat and leaned slightly toward me. Kayla, HR and compliance both logged into the system this morning. I didn't look up immediately. Time? I asked quietly. 7:58 a.m., she whispered. Early review, which meant my submission had already escalated internally. I opened my email. Subject, Ethics and Compliance. Acknowledgement, timestamp 8:02 a.m. I clicked. Your documentation has been formally registered and preserved under internal review protocol. All related digital materials are now protected from modification or deletion pending evaluation. Short, neutral, powerful. No emotion, only process. My phone vibrated. Unknown. Preservation lock changes everything. Unknown. He can't control the narrative logs anymore. For the first time, I didn't feel curiosity about who they were, because the truth was already confirmed through systems. Across the aisle, Derek closed his laptop for a brief moment and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Subtle tension, micro behavior, the kind most people wouldn't notice. but analysts notice patterns. Yesterday, confident archive maintenance. Today, repeated access attempts under preservation lock. That difference spoke louder than any apology. At 8:37 a.m., the internal activity panel refreshed again. Compliance access. caseref_Q3_internal. Review mode. Department credentials verified. My breathing stayed slow. Review mode meant auditors were now viewing the full archive. All 7 files, all timestamps, all behavioral logs, all audio attachments, including mine. The shadows from the window stretched across my keyboard as I continued working on a client report, maintaining visible normalcy. Because in corporate environments, composure during review periods becomes part of the institutional perception, not silence. Stability. Marcus leaned slightly over his monitor. Marcus, something going on with compliance today? I answered without looking up. System reviews happen regularly, I said evenly. Not a lie, not a disclosure, just professional neutrality. Across the office, Derek finally stood and walked toward the coffee station. His steps were slower than usual, his posture less relaxed. He greeted fewer people. Reputation pressure doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives quietly through institutional awareness. At 9:12 a.m., my system pinged again. Compliance review. Note added. Archive contains multiple private disclosures categorized as mentorship reflections without documented consent. My eyes paused on the screen. Multiple, not singular. Pattern officially acknowledged. Kayla's chair rolled slightly closer. Kayla, leadership meeting just got delayed. That mattered, because promotion committee meetings are rarely delayed unless new information requires review. I opened the leadership prep thread again. Derek's previous phrasing still sat there. Demonstrates composure, but exhibits signs of emotional internalization under pressure scenarios. But now, beneath it, a new system tag appeared. Leadership input under review. Compliance flagged documentation source. That single tag shifted the weight of his narrative instantly. Because once documentation sources are flagged, credibility gets re-evaluated. Across the office, Derek returned to his desk and opened his laptop again. The activity panel refreshed within seconds. Owner access attempt, reflection logs, 9:18 a.m. System notice, view only. Preservation active, view only. No edits, no reframing, no silent adjustments. He could see the archive, but he could no longer control it. The shadows on the floor shifted slightly as clouds passed over the sun, dimming the light across the office for a brief moment. The environment felt heavier, quieter, more observant. At 10:03 a.m., a new internal message arrived. Subject, Promotion Review Adjustment Notice. I opened it calmly. Due to ongoing documentation review, all mentorship-based evaluative inputs will be temporarily suspended pending compliance assessment. Suspended, not erased, not ignored. Suspended, which meant his behavioral profile entry about me was no longer influencing the promotion discussion. Institutional neutralization. My phone buzzed again. Unknown. He built profiles to influence promotions. Unknown. Compliance sees the pattern now. I locked the phone and placed it face down, because the system evidence already confirmed it. Across the office, Derek remained unusually quiet. No mini-huddles, no casual leadership commentary, no public reflections about emotional professionalism. Silence from him now carried more meaning than his earlier speeches. At 11:26 a.m., the audit feed refreshed once more. Compliance annotation. Audio file origin confirmed, extracted from restricted mentorship archive prior to internal distribution. There it was. Official confirmation. He didn't just receive my voice note. He archived it, then retrieved it from the archive, then distributed it internally. Structured misconduct, not accidental sharing, not miscommunication, systematic usage. Kayla exhaled softly. Kayla, the energy in this office feels different today. I nodded slightly. Because narratives are being audited, I replied. And audits replace perception with evidence. Across the glass wall, I noticed 2 senior managers walking toward a closed meeting room with tablets in hand. Their expressions were neutral, professional, focused, institutional response in motion. Derek glanced toward them briefly, then looked back at his screen. For the first time since this started, he didn't look confident. He looked calculated, measured, and cautious, because the power dynamic had shifted from social perception to documented review. I continued typing my report steadily, posture straight, expression calm, breathing even. No visible triumph, no emotional reaction, only professional consistency, because dignity restored quietly is more powerful than outrage displayed loudly. At 1:14 p.m., a final internal annotation appeared in the compliance panel. Case escalation recommended, mentorship ethics and documentation misuse. Escalation, which meant formal consequences were now being evaluated beyond internal notes. I leaned back slightly in my chair and folded my hands on the desk. Days ago, he forwarded my private voice note expecting embarrassment to control my narrative. Yesterday, he logged my composure as a behavioral observation. Today, the very archive he used to profile me was under institutional examination, and as the long shadows stretched across the office floor and Derek sat unusually silent at his desk, repeatedly viewing a locked archive he could no longer edit, one truth settled with quiet finality. His documentation system had stopped protecting him and started documenting him instead. The office sounded different the following Monday. Not louder, clearer. Mixed sounds layered together in a strange kind of balance. Keyboards tapping, elevator chimes, soft conversations. The faint lo-fi music from marketing returning to its usual volume. Even the air conditioning hum felt steadier, like the building itself had settled after a week of quiet institutional tension. Resolution rarely arrives with drama in corporate spaces. It arrives through emails, calendar blocks, and formal notices. I logged in at 8:26 a.m., placed my bag beside my chair, and opened my system dashboard. The morning light was softer today, diffused by thin clouds over the Atlanta skyline, casting a calm glow across the glass walls and desks. Mixed sensory calm. Not relief, not victory, just clarity. A new email sat at the top of my inbox. Subject, Compliance Review Outcome, Mentorship Documentation Case. Timestamp, 7:58 a.m. I opened it slowly. Following a formal review of archived mentorship records, internal communications, and audit logs, compliance has concluded that confidential employee disclosures were documented, categorized, and redistributed without consent under mentorship labeling. My fingers remained still on the trackpad. The email continued. Audio material originally stored within restricted mentorship archives was retrieved and distributed internally in a manner inconsistent with Clause 8.4, confidential disclosure handling. Official language, precise language, irreversible language, no emotional framing. Only documented findings. Below that, a one line stood out more than anything else. Leadership evaluative inputs linked to unauthorized documentation have been formally nullified, which meant the behavioral profile Derek submitted about my emotional internalization was no longer part of my promotion file. Institutional correction. Kayla rolled into the office at 8:41 a.m. and stopped beside my desk, eyes scanning my expression. Kayla, you got the email too? I nodded once. Yes, she exhaled slowly. Whole mentorship program is under policy review. That confirmed the scope had expanded beyond just me. Pattern recognition, not isolated incident. Across the office, Derek's desk was empty. Laptop gone, notebook gone, chair pushed in neatly. Not dramatic, just absent. Marcus leaned back in his chair and lowered his voice. Marcus. HR met with him Friday afternoon. I kept my tone neutral. Was there an announcement? He shook his head. No official announcement, just reassignment pending review. Reassignment. Corporate language for removal from influence without public spectacle. The lo-fi music played softly again, steady and familiar, blending with the normal rhythm of the office returning to its default pace. The tension from the past week had dissolved into something quieter. Institutional closure. At 9:12 a.m., another system notification appeared. Promotion review update. Mentorship-linked documentation removed from evaluation criteria. Performance metrics remain primary assessment basis. I stared at that line for a moment longer than expected, because that was the exact reversal. He tried to frame my vulnerability as a professional weakness. Now only my work metrics remained. Numbers, deliverables, client results, the things he couldn't distort. My phone buzzed once more. Unknown. "You handled it exactly right," I finally replied. "Me. Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then a message came through. Unknown. Former mentee. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. Unknown. "He archived my disclosures last year too." Unknown. "You're the first person who documented the system instead of reacting emotionally." I placed the phone down slowly. Not surprised. Not shocked. Just confirmed. Pattern? Not coincidence. At 10:03 a.m., a formal calendar invite appeared. Subject: compliance debrief. Optional attendance department, ethics and compliance. I accepted. The meeting room was different from conference room B. No glass walls, no performance optics, just neutral lighting and a rectangular table. A compliance officer sat across from me. Tablet open. "Thank you for your documentation," she said professionally. "Your report included verifiable system logs, policy alignment, and preserved metadata." Calm acknowledgement. No dramatics. No theatrics. She continued. "The archive contained 7 categorized reflection files involving private employee disclosures. None included written consent for evaluative or instructional use. 7. Exactly what the audit logs showed." She slid a digital document toward me. "County Corporate Record hash 2026 EC 48217, signed by Internal Notary Public," she said. "This registry confirms preservation, review, and institutional action. Legal anchor. Permanent record. Traceable outcome." I nodded once. "Will those files be deleted?" I asked. She answered carefully. "They will be sealed under restricted compliance records. Not erased. Preserved as documented misconduct reference. Preserved. Not hidden. Not lost. Recorded." That mattered more than deletion, because preservation prevents narrative rewriting. When I returned to the main office floor, the environment felt normal again. Conversations about deadlines, client calls, lunch plans, someone discussing Uber surge pricing near the elevator. Everyday life resumed, but perception had shifted quietly. Not toward me, toward systems. Kayla leaned toward me with a small smile. "Kayla, you didn't argue, you didn't explode, you just documented." I gave a calm response. "Documentation speaks longer than reactions." She nodded slowly. That's a quote right there. I allowed a small smile for the first time all week. Later that afternoon, an official HR memo circulated internally. Effective immediately, all mentorship documentation must exclude private disclosures unless explicit written consent is obtained and verified through compliance registry. Policy reform, institutional learning. Systemic correction, not because of outrage, because of evidence. At 3:27 p.m., my promotion review notification appeared. Status approved, advancement to senior analyst track, pending formal announcement. My hands rested quietly on the desk as I read it twice. Not because of sympathy, not because of drama, because my performance record remained untouched after the nullification of biased inputs. Out of full circle accountability. The same office that heard my private voice note days ago now functioned as if nothing scandalous had ever happened. But the system logs, registry files, and compliance records told a different story beneath the surface. Mixed sounds filled the space again. Music, typing, distant laughter, printer hum, elevator chime. The exact same sensory environment as the beginning. But my internal state was different. Steady, grounded, untouchable by narrative manipulation. Before logging off for the day, I opened my secured evidence folder one last time. Audit logs, policy clauses, metadata exports, compliance registry confirmation. Then I archived the folder into encrypted personal storage and closed the window. Not out of fear, out of closure. Because revenge in professional environments isn't about public confrontation. It's about quiet, documented truth that forces institutions to act. Days ago, he forwarded my private voice note to the entire office, expecting embarrassment to define me. Instead, it triggered a compliance registry, a preserved audit trail, a nullified evaluation input, a sealed misconduct archive, and policy reform tied to a notarized corporate record. He built a system to document others, and that system became the very evidence that documented him. I shut down my laptop, picked up my bag, and walked past the glass walls where the same office hum continued as always. Same lights, same desks, same sounds. But this time, when I walked through the space, no one looked at me with quiet curiosity. They looked at me with professional respect. And the difference wasn't loud. It was institutional. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.